The story begins with someone shouting loudly, crying, asking Cho Yufeng to hit her to death if he is a man. The voice echoes outside an old building, and papers fly through the air. Inside a small room, a young man is sleeping on his bed. He is lying face down, snoring loudly, and drool is dripping from his mouth. There are empty bottles and garbage on the floor beside the bed. His fingers twitch a little, and his face looks uncomfortable. He makes a small sound as if he is about to throw up. Suddenly, he wakes up and starts vomiting, shouting loudly in pain and discomfort. He sits up on the bed, grabbing his stomach and yelling. The room around him is messy, with bottles and trash scattered everywhere. He remembers a moment before he was inside a large hall, attending a banquet. He was wearing a white suit and smiling as others raised their glasses toward him. They called him CEO Cho and cheered while drinking with him. Suddenly the glass in his hand shattered. The sound was sharp and the pieces scattered. CEO Cho's expression changed, his face turned pale, and dark marks appeared under his eyes. He held his chest and bent forward, as if something was wrong inside him. He began to gag, unable to speak clearly. People around him looked surprised and worried. He collapsed onto the floor, trembling. Someone shouted, asking if CEO Cho was all right. Another person said he might have choked and told them to call for emergency help immediately. Everyone stood around him in shock as he lay on the ground. In the present, the man suddenly opens his eyes. He screams loudly in shock, his voice echoing through the room. He sits up quickly, sweating and breathing hard, as if waking from a nightmare. He looks around the room with confusion. The window curtains move from the wind, and he stares toward the outside. He seems unsure of where he is. He stands up and looks down at his feet. He is wearing simple slippers. His face shows surprise and confusion. He walks toward the doorway and asks quietly where he is. But suddenly he stops. A sudden realization strikes him. His eyes widen. Memories rush into his mind all at once. He remembers being married to a woman named Zhang Xiaoduo for 2 years. He remembers losing his parents in an accident caused by a machine malfunction. He remembers drinking heavily, gambling, and acting lost. He remembers moments of sadness and anger, holding his head and shouting. He remembers arguments and broken relationships. All of these memories hit him at the same time, making his head ache. He stands there overwhelmed by everything that comes back to him. The man looks at his hands. They are shaking. His fingers tremble as memories continue to flow into his mind. He whispers to himself, unable to believe what he feels. The memories inside him are real, and they are his, but they also feel like they come from another time. His eyes widen in shock. Sweat forms on his face. He asks himself quietly if he has been reborn. He stands frozen, confused and overwhelmed, trying to understand what has happened to him. Just then, he hears crying from somewhere in the room. The sound gets louder. He turns his head, surprised. On the floor, his wife Zhang Xiaoduo is sitting alone. She is curled up, hugging her knees. Broken glass and an empty bottle are scattered around her. She is crying hard, calling out his name, calling him an idiot and blaming him through her tears. Chu Yufeng steps closer and speaks softly, unsure of what to say. Zhang Xiaoduo slowly raises her head. Her eyes are red and filled with tears. Her expression shows hurt and sadness. Chu Yufeng looks at her carefully. He remembers her name. He takes a small breath and speaks quietly, with guilt in his voice. He apologizes to Zhang Xiaoduo for everything he did to her. Zhang Xiaoduo's eyes widen in surprise when she sees the change in his behavior. But before she can say anything, there is a knock at the door. Cho Yufeng turns his head. He reaches out and slowly opens the door. A woman and a small child are standing outside. The woman's face is bruised, showing she had been hit recently. The child holds onto her sleeve, looking tired and scared. Cho Yufeng looks at the bruise on her cheek, and his expression changes. His eyes widen as he asks Yuna who did this to her. But suddenly, he remembers the cause from the memories he regained. He recalls that their parents had died in an accident. Yuna yelling and crying, blaming Huhan for her parents' death. However, Huhan slapped her hard across the face and told her to stay quiet. Back in the present, Cho Yufeng stood still, watching quietly, his expression serious and troubled. The woman looked tired and sad. She told Cho Yufeng that he already knew their situation, so there was no need to ask. She then explained that there was no food left at home. Little Zheng had not eaten for a whole day, so she had come to ask for money to buy food. Cho Yufeng told them to come inside first. Then he asked Xiaoduo how much money and food they still had at home. Xiaoduo replied that there was only 5 yuan left, but there were still 10 kilograms of rice and 2 kilograms of flour. Chu Yufeng approached Xiao Duo and told her to give the 5 yuan and 10 kilograms of rice to Yuna. He said that the flour left at home was enough for them to eat for a few meals, and that he would find a way to solve the problem. Xiao Duo was surprised to see the change in his behavior, but she agreed. She handed him the money and rice, saying that it was ready. Chu Yufeng walked over to Yuna and told her to take it. Yuna and the child looked surprised. He then turned and walked away while Xiao Duo watched quietly. She asked him where he was going. Chu Yufeng kept walking and said he was going to settle some matters with Hu Han. Outside his house, Cho Yufeng saw old-style welding shops, run-down roads and street vendors shouting, selling metalware and fresh steamed buns. He walked through the busy street. Soon he stopped in front of an old apartment building and looked up at it. He went inside the old apartment, stood on the staircase, and thought about it. He found it strange that Chi Yufeng's parents, who had worked in the steel factory for almost 20 years, would die because of a machine malfunction. He then thought that since Hu Han was the workshop director, giving compensation would make Hu Han look good, and the factory would pay for it anyway, so he believed there should be no reason for Hu Han to refuse. Meanwhile, inside the apartment, 2 men walked down a hallway and stopped at a green door. As they were about to open the door, suddenly Cho Yufeng appeared behind them. The 2 men were startled. They turned and shouted, asking who he was. Cho Yufeng smiled and spoke casually, asking if they had just come back. The 2 workers glared at him and demanded to know what his problem was. They stepped forward as if ready to fight. However, an old man appeared and stopped them. Then he asked Cho Yufeng why he was there. Chu Yufeng put his hands together politely and said he came to make a request. The old man asked what the request was. Chu Yufeng smiled and put his hands together again. He said it was his parents' fault for using the machine carelessly, and his sister had also caused trouble. He apologized to the old man on her behalf. Upon hearing this, the old man held his chest and spoke with a sad expression. He said he was also upset about what happened in the factory. He mentioned that his sister Yuna kept blaming him for the parents' death, and he called it unreasonable. Cho Yufeng laughed awkwardly and agreed with the old man. He explained that his family was struggling and he came to ask for compensation. The old man hesitated. However, before he could say anything, suddenly Cho Yufeng raised his voice, saying that if the factory refused, he would cause a disturbance since he had nothing left to lose. But the old man tried to calm him down. He warned that causing trouble at the factory could get him arrested, and asked what would happen to his family then. But Cho Yufeng refuses to back down. He raises his voice again, saying that if they don't give the money, he will start a riot and find out whether his parents really made a mistake with the machine. However, the old man says the factory won't pay if Yufeng's parents were careless. Then he softens and promises that since he has been friends with the parents for years, he will give the money himself. Yufeng asks how much he will give him. However, he warns that if the sum is too small, he would rather riot at the factory. The old man tells him that the usual compensation is 600 yuan, but he can only give 500 because he also needs money. He says he will go inside and get the money. Chu Yufeng stands and waits. He watches as the old man walks away to retrieve it. The old man goes inside and starts searching for the money. He sweats and looks uneasy while looking through his things. Then the older man comes back and hands him a stack of bills, saying that this money is for him. After getting the money, Cho Yufeng starts heading back home. However, before he goes, he says in his heart that he will definitely make Hu Han pay for his sins. Just as he is walking to his home, suddenly he notices something and pauses. He turns his head and sees an old man hiding near the wall, holding a bundle of apple candy tied to a straw figure. Cho Yufeng quickly buys one of the apple candies and goes home. Moments later, he reaches the house and knocks on the door. Inside, Xiao Duo turns her head, looking toward the door. She steps outside and sees Cho Yufeng standing there, smiling and holding a skewer of candied fruit. He says happy birthday to her and hands it to her. Xiao Duo looks surprised and touched. Her cheeks turn pink as she holds her hand to her chest. Xiao Yufeng smiles gently while holding the candied fruit. He apologizes, saying he could only bring this because it was already late when he left Hu Han's place. Xiao Duo takes a bite. Her cheeks puff slightly as she chews. She says it tastes sweet. She shyly asks if he wants to take a bite too. Chu Yufeng shakes his head and says he already ate. He tells her that this treat is for her. He quietly thinks to himself, hoping that after he leaves, the real Chu Yufeng will treat her well. Now it is already late at night. Xiao Duo goes into the room and asks Cho Yufeng if he is not coming inside to sleep. The night sky was calm and quiet. Inside the room, Chou Yufeng and Xiao Duo were sleeping on the same bed. Xiao Duo was lying close behind Chou Yufeng, her arm resting near him. Their slippers were placed on the floor beside the bed. As they slept, Xiao Duo's body pressed gently against Chou Yufeng from behind, the front of her chest squeezed against him. Chou Yufeng's eyes opened, his face turned red, and he looked nervous. However, he told himself quietly that she was someone else's wife. Just like that, morning came. Outside, a rooster was crowing loudly as the sun rose. The sound continued over and over. Chou Yufeng suddenly woke up from the noise. He sat up on the bed with a tired and annoyed face. Chou Yufeng complained that the rooster was too noisy. He said that one day he was going to deal with Aunt Wang's rooster. Xiao Duo walked out of the room wearing her slippers. She saw a bowl of steaming noodles on the table and was surprised. Chou Yufeng was standing there holding chopsticks and smiling. He said that he made longevity noodles to make up for her birthday yesterday. He told her to eat the egg first. He borrowed the egg from Aunt Wang, but Aunt Wang didn't know about it. Xiao Duo sat at the table and asked Chou Yufeng why he would steal something. Chou Yufeng, however, replied that he didn't steal it. He only borrowed the egg and would return it later. Then he reached into his pocket, grabbed a stack of money, and placed it on the table. Xiao Duo's eyes widened in shock when she saw it. She loudly asked how Chou Yufeng had so much money and questioned if he had stolen it. Chou Yufeng told Xiao Duo not to panic. He said the money was solatium for his mom and dad. Xiao Duo looked confused. She said the factory claimed the accident was his parents' fault, so she didn't understand why they would pay compensation. However, Chou Yufeng explained that he got the money from Hu Han. Hu Han was afraid that he would cause trouble at the factory, so Hu Han gave him the money on behalf of the factory. Chou Yufeng what he planned to do now. Chou Yufeng said he would try to gather evidence. He believed Hu Han could not hide everything from them. Since he accepted the money, Hu Han would now lower his guard. Chou Yufeng also said that with this money, they would not have to worry about food for a while. Xiao Duo looked at him with surprise. She slowly asked if he was really the Chou Yufeng she knew, because he seemed different from before. Upon hearing this, Chou Yufeng pretended to act normal. He tried to laugh it off and said she was talking nonsense. Then he mentioned the money and suggested that Xiao Du take 200, he would take 100, and he would give 100 to Yuna. The last 100 would be used to buy food. Xiao Du agreed. After giving the money, Chou Yufeng left the house to go look for Yuna. Outside, Aunt Wang was feeding her chickens. She called out to him and asked if he had seen her eggs. Chou Yufeng admitted calmly that he borrowed one when she wasn't there. Aunt Wang's face changed. She got angry and shouted loudly, saying he never asked her permission and accused him of being inconsiderate. Chou Yufeng calmly took out money. He handed her 2 yuan and told her that he would pay for the egg. Aunt Wang's anger disappeared immediately. She accepted the money and smiled, telling him that he could feel free to borrow again next time. As Chou Yufeng walked down the street, a tall man with short red hair leaned against a wall. He had a toothpick in his mouth and looked relaxed. He called out to Yufeng and asked where he was going. His name was Nike Liu. Chou Yufeng greeted him. However, before he could say anything, Nike Liu mentioned that there would be a gambling match with Chen Guoda that night. He suggested that the two of them team up and try to win Chen Guoda's money. Chou Yufeng, upon hearing Chen Guoda's name, remembered that Chen Guoda's father used to be the leader of the Linshui steel factory, and now Chen Guoda was also working there. Nike Liu agreed and told him that he would come to Yufeng's house that night, and asked if his wife Xiao Duo would be there. Chou Yufeng, however, told Nike that he needed to meet Chen Guoda first, so he would go to Nike Liu's house instead. Then he said he would think about it. After saying that, he turned and left. However, after Yufeng walked away, Nike Liu watched him leave. Nike Liu called him a coward in his mind. He wondered how someone like Yufeng could marry such a beautiful wife. Meanwhile, Chou Yufeng reached home and saw the door was slightly open. He found it strange and wondered why the door wasn't locked. He pushed the door gently and looked inside. And he saw little Zheng peek out from behind the door. Yufeng was surprised when he saw him. Seeing Yufeng, little Zheng happily called out to his sister, saying, "Big brother is here." His sister Chou Yui came to the door and asked what was going on. Little Zheng pointed to Chou Yufeng and repeated that big brother had arrived. But when Chou Yui saw Chou Yufeng, she looked a little surprised. She was inside the kitchen preparing dough. When he saw her, he told her to go rest, saying he would handle it. Chou Yu was confused, but she stepped aside. Yufeng then began kneading the dough seriously. Yu stood next to him and watched quietly. Just then, Yuna entered the house and called out to Yu Yu, asking if the noodles were ready. Cho Yufeng smiled brightly and said he was making them and they would be done soon. Upon seeing Cho Yufeng, Yuna was surprised and asked him why he was there. However, before he could reply, the pot on the stove began to boil. Chow Yufeng didn't answer her question. He focused on the noodles and said they could talk later. He then lifted the dough and pulled it smoothly into long noodles. Yuna watched with wide eyes, shocked by how skilled he was. But just then, she noticed the empty bowl and asked Cho Yufeng why he used so much flour. Cho Yufeng smiled and said it was fine because their family had money now. Yuna was surprised and asked where that money came from. She got angry and shouted, reminding him that before this, he only moved houses, sold things, gambled and even hit his wife. She demanded to know what he actually did to get the money. However, Cho Yufeng didn't say anything. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of money. He gave the money to Yuna and told her to take it. He said she would have exams soon and should eat better food, not be afraid to spend or eat more. Yuna looked at the money in shock. Seeing so much money, she became worried and raised her voice, asking Cho Yufeng where he got the money and if he did something bad. Cho Yufeng quickly tried to calm her down and told her they could talk about it after dinner. He mentioned that he even cooked fried meat, something they had not eaten in a long time. Upon hearing this, Yuna agreed. They all sat at the table to eat. Cho Yufeng then explained that he asked Hu Han for money. Upon hearing this, both girls were shocked in confusion. Cho Yufeng spoke seriously, saying their parents' death wasn't an accident. He believed it was connected to Hu Han. He suspected that the equipment Hu Han bought for the steel mill had dangerous safety problems that caused the tragedy. The girl's eyes widened as Yu Yue held his arm tightly and asked Cho Yufeng what they should do now. Chu Yufeng said that their parents were killed because of faulty equipment and Hu Han's mistakes. He explained that Hu Han was too scared to check the machines, so he planned to collect evidence first. Upon hearing this, Yuna looked at Chu Yufeng and asked him how he was going to collect evidence. Yufeng explained that to buy equipment there must be purchase documents. Once he found them, he would contact the supplier and make sure Hu Han couldn't escape responsibility. Chu Yufeng spoke with determination, telling Yuna and Yu Yue not to worry. He promised to find a way to solve everything and to prove their parents' innocence. Both girls looked at him with puzzled faces, unsure how to respond. Then Yufeng smiled and handed some money to the little boy, telling him to use 50 fen to buy candy bars, and told Yuna to focus on her exams, leaving the tuition fees to her elder brother. After telling them about his plan, Cho Yufeng started going back to his home. However, when he was walking down the street, passing by busy shops and bright signs, a vendor nearby was shouting, selling cool popsicles. Yufeng stopped and said he would take one. The vendor opened the box filled with frozen popsicles and handed one to him, and asked for 2 fen. Yufeng paid him and took the popsicle. The sunlight reflected off the ice, making it shine brightly. Chu Yufeng sat on a bench outside a building, holding the popsicle in his hand. He took a small bite and looked around thoughtfully, saying to himself that each era truly had its own characteristics. As he was enjoying, suddenly someone patted Cho Yufeng on the back and greeted him. He turned around with a confused look and saw a group of people walking toward him, smiling. One of them waved and said hi. Yufeng looked closer. He recognized them immediately. They were Fu Dahai and Zhang Ziri, his college classmates. Cho Yufeng smiled and greeted them, saying it had been a long time. As he looked at the group, he recognized another woman among them. She was Shen Ziran, known to be Zhang Xiaoduo's best friend. Yufeng noticed that she was dressed neatly and confidently, thinking that she must be the most well-off among the group. However, when he was admiring the woman, suddenly a man pointed at Cho Yufeng and shouted angrily, asking if he was out of his mind and what he was looking at. Another person nearby tried to calm him down, saying it wasn't necessary to act like that. The angry man, named Xiao Shan, kept yelling. He called Yufeng trash and accused him of behaving like a hooligan in front of Shen Ziran. He shouted that he couldn't understand how Zhang Xiaoduo ever fell in love with someone like him. Just then, one of the women in the group laughed softly and said maybe Zhang Xiaoduo liked this kind of hooligan. Chu Yufeng calmly took a bite of his popsicle, chewing it slowly. Then he smiled and said that Xiao Shan had misunderstood. He explained that Xiaoduo and Ziran were friends and there was no way he would act like a hooligan in front of his wife's friend. Shen Ziran told Xiao Shan to calm down, saying it was okay. She looked serious for a moment, then spoke again, telling him that it was all right. She reminded him that they were all classmates once and told him to let it go and move on. As the group turned and began to walk away together, Yu Feng stood still, watching them leave with a cold expression. His eyes narrowed as he thought to himself that Hu Xiaoshan didn't have many good days left. After meeting his classmates, he did a little shopping and started going back home. As he was walking down the street carrying 2 bags, one in each hand, he turned a corner and saw Zhang Xiaoduo walking toward him. Both of them stopped and called out in surprise at the same time. Zhang Xiaoduo looked at him with wide eyes, clearly not expecting to meet him there. Zhang Xiaoduo quickly cleaned her mouth, as ice cream was still left on it. Seeing this, Chou Yufeng asked her if she had also eaten ice cream. She looked a little surprised and nervously explained that it had been a long time since she'd eaten one. She held out a bag and said she had bought him a watermelon. Chou Yufeng smiled warmly at her. He gently placed his hand on her head and told her that they had money now. He said she could buy whatever she wanted to eat and that they would have even more in the future. Zhang Xiaoduo looked up at him and nodded softly. As they walked together, he offered to carry her bag, saying she looked tired. She quickly said she wasn't tired, but he insisted, telling her it was all right and to give it to him. Seeing Chou Yufeng's gentle and caring side again, Zhang Xiaoduo started to remember her college days when Chou Yufeng would always carry her stuff and do everything for her. Chou Yufeng looked at her and asked why she was standing there in a daze. He told her to come along so they could go home. She blinked, snapping out of her thoughts, and quickly replied that she was coming. Then she ran toward him with a small smile. Hand in hand, the two walked down the quiet street together under the clear blue sky. Sometime later, under the night sky, suddenly someone in Chou Yufeng's neighbor's house shouted angrily, telling the person outside to just die there. It was Nike. He had been kicked out of his house by his wife. Then he walked toward Chou Yufeng's house and knocked on his door. Chou Yufeng opened the door and saw Nike outside. He asked Nike what was going on, however Nike told him that they should talk outside. Nike explained that he had lost a bit of money in the morning, but said it was normal to win and lose while gambling. He complained angrily that his wife at home had gone crazy over it. Then he looked at Chou Yufeng and mentioned the director's son Chen Guoda. He said that Chen Guoda was easy to trick and got addicted quickly. He suggested that if they worked together they could take advantage of him. Chou Yufeng smiled and asked him how much money he had brought with him. Nike scratched his head awkwardly and laughed, saying he hadn't received his salary from his wife yet. He asked if he could borrow some money first, promising to return it after they won. Yufeng laughed softly and reminded him that he still hadn't paid back the 3 yuan he already owed, and said that he only had 1 yuan with him at the moment. Nike shouted in disbelief, asking if Yufeng really brought only 1 yuan to gamble. Yufeng looked at him calmly and reminded him that he also didn't have any money. Hearing this, Nike fell silent. Yufeng then shrugged and said maybe they could try next time. But then Nike grabbed his arm, insisting they were already there and that he would lend him money. Suddenly, the man bent down and started taking something out of his shoe. Yufeng looked confused at first, then his eyes widened in shock as Nike pulled out hidden money with a grin. After getting the money, both of them started heading to the place where they were supposed to meet Chen Guoda. As they arrived, both men turned toward a sound and saw someone standing by the gate with a small dog. The person called out, asking if Nike was there. Seeing them, the man added that Chou Yufeng was also present and invited them both to come inside. Nike asked Brother Chen why he brought them so far just to gamble. Brother Chen took a drag from his cigarette and said it was nothing. He explained that he had helped his grandfather carry fruits that day and would have to continue tomorrow, so this was the only place he could take them. Nike grinned and said he had heard there was a new way to gamble, asking Chen to teach them. Chen nodded and told them to sit down, saying he would show them how it worked. Brother Chen held up a card and explained the rules of the game. He said that a single deck of cards was used, with 3 cards placed face down on the table. The rest were dealt to 3 players. The first player to draw a face-up card could make the first bet, and the one with the highest bet would claim the 3 face-down cards as their own. He continued, saying that the game was very fun. The 2 players who didn't place a bet could team up and go against the one called the landlord. Among the 2 players who teamed up, they would win as long as one of them won. He said the card combinations were the same as usual, things like 3+1, 3+2, or 4+2. Yufeng leaned his head on his hand and pointed out that it sounded just like the game fighting the landlord. Chen smiled and nodded. He shuffled the cards and said they should start, adding that he would be the landlord for the first game. Brother Chen held a pair of sevens and slammed his cards on the table with a grin. Nike smirked and said he got a double. Yu Feng revealed his cards and said it was a pair of eights. Nike glanced at his own hand and frowned, saying that his cards were useless and he would pass. Then, with a grin, Brother Chen threw down 2 cards and announced a pair of tens. Brother Chen smiled confidently, placed his cards on the table and said he won again. Both of his friends sat across from him, looking helpless as Chen continued to win every round. Brother Chen laid down his cards with a smile, showing a pair of sixes. He laughed, saying it was another double. Yu Feng calmly placed his cards next, revealing a pair of kings. Then Nike grinned excitedly, shouted that it was his turn, and threw his cards on the table with force. His cards showed a pair of aces. Thinking he had won, he puffed up proudly, until he looked again and realized he had attacked the wrong person. Yu Feng stared at him calmly, while Brother Chen smoked his cigarette and said he would pass. Just then Nike sighed, saying he had no more cards left and could only play singles. He placed down a single 3. Brother Chen looked at him and threw down a jack, saying he was playing singles too. After seeing no one respond, Chen smiled confidently and said that since everyone passed, he won again. Seeing this, Nike raised his thumb and smiled, saying Brother Chen was amazing. Chen took a calm puff from his cigarette, while Yu Feng silently looked at his cards. His golden eyes narrowed as he saw his hand full of 2s and a jack. He scratched his head and sighed, thinking that his cards were completely useless. Nike grinned and laid his cards on the table, showing 4 sixes. He said it looked like he was starting. Just then, Yu Feng smiled back and raised his cards, revealing 4 2s. He said it was fortunate since that's what he had left. He slammed his cards down on the table, stunning everyone. Brother Chen looked surprised, while Nike's eyes went wide in shock. All he could say was pass. Yu Feng counted the score and said with a grin that it was a small king and 3 bombs, making it 4 yuan each. He then turned to Nike and asked where his money was. Later that night, the game continued. Someone played a pair of 2s and Nike shouted that he was going for doubles. The others quickly responded saying pass one after another. Brother Chen held up his card with a smile and said he won again. Nike slammed his hand on the table in frustration, shouting that the cards were stupid. However, Yu Feng told him that he now owed almost 100 yuan to Guoda. Angry but determined, Nike shouted that he would play a few more rounds and go big next time. However, Yu Feng looked at him and asked what he was going to bet with, wondering if he even had a single coin left in his socks. Hearing that, Nike Lu slammed the table angrily, shouting that no one was leaving and demanding respect. Yu Feng threw the cards on the table and glared back, saying he would talk however he wanted. He then told Nike Lu to bring out his money if he wanted to keep playing, otherwise to get lost. Then he leaned closer and said coldly that if Nike ever bothered his wife again, he would beat him into a pulp. Yu Feng's expression darkened, his eyes glowing red, but he calmed himself down and turned to Brother Chen, saying that since Brother Chen was being so generous, he would stop there for today. He then smiled cheerfully, saying he would treat Brother Chen to dinner the next day to make up for it. Brother Chen sat quietly, a cigarette in his mouth, staring at him in silence. After the all-night game, he started going back home. As he was walking, he thought to himself that Chen Guoda's father was a retired factory director with many connections, and that he might be able to help him. After that, he returned home and jumped onto his bed, sighing that he was so tired. As he lay there, suddenly he heard a voice, Nike's wife, scolding him for losing all the money and asking how they were supposed to survive like that. Yu Feng listened with a tired sigh and quickly fell asleep. After some time he woke up and went to the Wu Wei tea house. He raised his hand and asked the owner if he could have some tea. The owner smiled and said it would cost 5 fen. As the tea was poured into a cup, and just as he was about to take a sip, suddenly he overheard someone mention that the eldest son of the Liu family had left for the city. As he listened, one man said that the eldest son of the Liu family had resigned from his job just like that, sighing that he didn't understand what the man was thinking. Yu Feng quietly sipped his tea, thinking to himself that the 80s was a crucial time when many millionaires began their businesses. He looked thoughtful and wondered what would happen if he were to return to the year 2020. As the sun set over the buildings, Yu Feng looked out from the balcony, thinking it would be a waste to let such an opportunity slip away. After a moment, he shook his head and laughed, saying that he still had his hard-working career in the 20th century. Then, with a determined look, he clenched his fists and declared that after taking care of Huhan's affairs, he would return to where he came from. Just then, he looked down from the balcony and noticed someone arriving on a motorcycle. He thought to himself that today's hero had arrived. A moment later, Cho Yufeng called out excitedly for Brother Chen. Cho Yufeng smiled and said it was quite a coincidence meeting there. Brother Chen agreed and mentioned that he had just finished harvesting and was completely exhausted. Chu Yufeng smiled and told Brother Chen that he had come just in time, inviting him to dinner to apologize for what happened yesterday. Chen waved his hands saying it was nothing serious, but Chu Yufeng insisted, laughing that it wasn't a small matter to him. He urged Chen to come along, suggesting they go eat at the state restaurant. At the state hotel restaurant, the waitress politely asked what they would like to order. Cho Yufeng asked to see the menu. As he opened it, his eyes widened in shock. The prices were listed: Mao Tai vodka for 7 yuan, braised fish for 2.9 yuan, ginseng chicken for 4.5 yuan, and mapo tofu for 0.39 yuan. Tears filled his eyes as he looked at the menu, overwhelmed by how expensive everything was. He then ordered many dishes for Brother Chen. Seeing so many dishes, Brother Chen told Yufeng that he was being too polite for ordering so much, asking if it wasn't a bit too much food. However, Cho Yufeng smiled and told Brother Chen it was fine, saying he was happy to finally share a meal with him and that they should eat freely. Nearby, two men entered the restaurant, talking about how they had heard good things about the state restaurant and that the food there was said to be delicious. Just then, one of them noticed Yufeng and called out to him, asking with a teasing tone if he had come there just to waste money. Cho Yufeng quietly kept eating, pretending not to hear anything. However, the man shouted angrily, calling Yufeng trash and yelling that Zheng Xiaoduo didn't even have food to eat while he was wasting money there. A woman nearby frowned and said she had lost her appetite, telling the others to go to another restaurant. The man agreed and walked out with her, leaving the place with a forced smile. Chen looked at Cho Yufeng calmly and asked if he had a grudge against Hu Han's son. Cho Yufeng explained that they used to be classmates and had some conflicts in the past. Brother Chen then took a drag from his cigarette and mentioned that when they played cards yesterday, Cho Yufeng had kept letting him win. He asked if Yufeng really thought he wouldn't notice. Yufeng looked at Chen and asked if he had a bad relationship with Hu Han, saying that Chen didn't seem happy when he asked about it earlier. Chen sighed and explained that during the voting for the factory director's position, Hu Han had voted for Xu Changjiang instead of him. Because of that single vote, he lost the election for workshop director. He clenched his teeth and added that his father had been the director of Hu Han's workshop before retiring. Anger filled his voice as he called Hu Han a traitor. Yufeng quickly tried to calm him down and offered to pour him some wine. Chen relaxed a little and agreed. While pouring the drink, Yufeng asked who Xu Changjiang was and if he was the son of the director of the Linshui steel factory. Chen scoffed and said it was nonsense, explaining that Xu Changjiang was just someone who had connections with a foreign supplier. Yufeng asked Chen why he didn't think about going to sea instead of staying in the old factory. Chen replied that he had considered it, but his father didn't agree. Brother Chen leaned closer and told Cho Yufeng that a friend of his had gone to Shanghai last year to make electrical appliances and earned more than 100,000 in one go. He exclaimed that it was $100,000 and said that his friend must have become a millionaire. Smiling, he then asked when someone could ever finish spending that much money. Cho Yufeng laughed and said it was great, nodding in agreement. Then he smiled and mentioned that the factory would soon be paying the heat stroke prevention fee, asking if the amount was quite large. Chen confirmed and asked what about it. Yufeng leaned closer and suggested that if Chen distributed the fruits harvested by his grandfather's family to the workers, then the factory's heat stroke prevention expenses would essentially belong to him. However, Chen quickly waved his hands and refused, saying no. He looked nervous and explained that if something went wrong, he would be in big trouble. He said the workers might even write a report letter to his grandfather. Yufeng laughed and placed his hand on his chest, saying that Chen's grandfather was his grandfather too. Chen looked confused and asked what he meant. Yufeng then smiled and explained that they could change the middleman and use his identity to provide the fruits instead. Chen suddenly laughed and said he couldn't believe he hadn't thought of that idea himself, calling Yufeng smart. Later that night, as they left the restaurant, Yufeng offered to take Chen home. Chen looked surprised and asked if Yufeng knew how to ride a motorcycle. Yufeng smiled and said it wasn't a big deal. As they rode under the night sky, Chen praised Yufeng's riding skills, and Yufeng laughed, saying that Chen was a kind person. Late at night, Yufeng quietly opened the door, thinking that Xiaoduo should already be asleep, but when he peeked inside, he was shocked to see Xiaoduo sitting awake in the room, looking right at him. Yufeng stepped inside and asked her why she was still awake. She didn't answer at first and stayed silent. Yufeng scratched his head with an awkward smile and said he was too late and apologized. She looked at him quietly, her expression soft but hard to read. She remembered that when she met her friend today, her friend told her that her mother Zhang had been hospitalized and was still in a coma when she visited a few days ago, yet she kept talking about her. Xiao Duo quietly replied that her mother seemed to be doing better now. However, her friend got even more upset and said it was easier to change mountains and rivers than to change a person's character. She shouted, asking what anyone could expect from a gambler who only knew how to hit women every day. She advised her to get a divorce with Yufeng. In the present, Xiao Duo sat quietly, breathing shakily. Her eyes looked red as if she was holding back her feelings. Suddenly, she stood up and rushed toward Yufeng, calling his name loudly. She threw herself into his arms. With her face blushing, she told him softly that he could do whatever he wanted tonight. Yufeng's eyes widened in shock. His face turned red as he looked at her. Later at night, Yufeng lay on the bed, staring up in silence, thinking about what just happened. He told Xiao Duo that he was not feeling well today. He said he would go for a walk and told her to go to bed first. He stood under a running faucet, letting cold water pour over his head. He kept telling himself to calm down. Water dripped down his face as he looked up. He reminded himself that he was the one who would eventually return, and he told himself not to hold on to things he shouldn't do. Next day, a rooster crowed on the rooftop as the morning light spread over the courtyard. Xiao Duo stood alone outside, looking around the quiet place. She looked back at the house and said goodbye to Yufeng. As she walked away under the orange sky, she thought that if he had changed a little earlier, she wouldn't have needed to wait. After that, she went to the telephone booth and called her father. Her father's voice came through the phone asking who it was and what happened, calling her Xiao Duo and telling her he was always there for her. She lowered her eyes and said she was all right, but she was just homesick. Her father told her not to go anywhere and to wait for him, saying he would come and take her home. Meanwhile, Yufeng went to meet Brother Chen. Seeing Yufeng, Brother Chen told him that he had told his idea to his dad, and his dad agreed right away. Yufeng was surprised to hear that. Then he told Brother Chen that now they only needed Brother Chen's connections. Brother Chen in the hat smiled and told Yufeng that if everything worked, he would give him 100 yuan as a reward. Yufeng smiled and said he would thank him in advance. After that, he came back to his house. As he was going to his house, Aunt Wang told Yufeng that many relatives had arrived at his place. Yufeng looked confused and wondered if it was Xiao Duo's family. He pushed the door open and looked inside. At the gate, 3 people stood together. A tall man named Zhang Yongguang, a woman named Zhang Xin, and beside her stood Xiao Duo. He quickly stepped forward with a bright expression. He smiled and asked his parents when they had come, saying they should have told him earlier so he could prepare. Yufeng asked if they had eaten, saying he would go cook some food. But before Yufeng could react, Zhang Yongguang suddenly raised his hand. The next moment, his palm struck Yufeng's face hard. He shouted that the slap was for his daughter. The sound echoed as Yufeng's head moved from the impact. Zhang Yongguang shouted again, saying Yufeng should look at how much he had made his daughter suffer. Xiao Duo called out to her father, her eyes filled with tears. Yufeng lowered his head and stayed silent. Zhang Yongguang lifted his hand again for another slap. He said this one was from him, but before he could hit, Xiao Duo reached out and shouted for her father to stop. Then the scene quieted down. Xiao Duo hurried to Yufeng and asked if he was all right. Yufeng looked at her and said he owed her this. He said he had disappointed her before. He looked into her eyes and apologized for everything he did to her. Zhang Yongguang shouted again, telling Yufeng to stop pretending, and demanded that they get a divorce. The two stood silently facing each other. Then Zhang Xin stepped forward, crying, and begged Yufeng to spare her daughter. She began coughing badly. Her husband rushed to her side and told her not to get angry. She kept coughing with tears in her eyes as he tried to calm her down. Yufeng turned to Xiao Duo and asked what she thought. Xiao Duo looked down. She slowly turned away and called Yufeng, telling him, "Let's divorce." After hearing that, both of them went to the government office building and prepared the document for divorce. Inside, the staff member told Shou Yufeng and Zhang Xiaoduo that he would stamp the document if there was no other problem. Both of them stood quietly, not saying anything. The staff member looked at them and said he did not understand what young people were thinking these days, but it was not his concern. He then pressed the stamp on the divorce agreement, which had their names written on it. After signing the divorce agreement, they went to meet her parents, who were waiting outside the government office building. Xiaoduo looked at her mother and asked her to give her some time to talk to Yufeng. She then faced Yufeng and said the money he gave her last time still had 285 yuan left. She tried to hand the money back to him, but he gently pushed her hand away. He told her to take it, saying he owed her too much and felt embarrassed to take anything from her. He then added that if he became the old version of himself again someday, she must cut all ties with him. Xiaoduo looked confused and asked what he meant. Cho Yufeng told her to just remember it and said her parents were waiting, asking her to leave. She looked surprised as he guided her forward. As she walked away, Yufeng waved and told Xiaoduo to take care of herself. After saying goodbye to Xiaoduo, Yufeng started going back to his home. However, when he was on his way home, suddenly Brother Chen ran toward Yufeng, shouting that they succeeded. He reached Yufeng and said the factory announced that the summer bonus would now be given out as fruits. He got excited, saying they could earn more than 1,500 yuan from the bonus just once. He told Yufeng to give it his all and promised an extra 200 yuan. However, Yufeng answered that they hadn't bought the plastic bags yet. Brother Chen mentioned that the closest plastic factory was in Lujin City. As they rode a motorcycle, Yufeng asked if Brother Chen knew anyone there because the factory didn't deal with small businesses. Brother Chen looked shocked and said he thought Yufeng knew someone there. Yufeng said he didn't know anyone either and they would think of something once they arrived. Brother Chen became nervous and said that without plastic bags they would be exposed easily. As they reached the plastic factory, Brother Chen asked Yufeng how they would enter. Yufeng said they would ride in, but just then a guard stopped them, asking who they were. Yufeng smiled and confidently said he was looking for the factory owner about something urgent and asked why the hotlines were unreachable. The guard asked if he was looking for Mr. Li. Yufeng asked which room Mr. Li was in. The guard told him it was on the 3rd floor, the first room on the left. Yufeng thanked him and rode off quickly. Brother Chen behind him worried, saying they didn't even know the factory owner. However, Yufeng told him to keep his mouth shut later. After that they reached a door with a sign that said Mr. Li's office. They knocked and inside Mr. Li looked up with a cup in his hand and told them to come in. Mr. Li looked at them and asked who they were. Yufeng smiled and said he was the CEO of Guoda Fruits and that it was his pleasure to meet Mr. Li. Mr. Li asked how they got in. Yufeng said they informed the security and explained that he was just passing by. He said he originally wanted to go to Zhuhai City to buy plastic bags, but he heard the factory's plastic bags were good and said they were fruit exporters. Mr. Li repeated the words fruit exporters to himself, then drank from his cup and said the plastic industry had nothing to do with fruits. Yufeng held a cigarette and explained to Director Li that they went to Linshui City to buy green fruits, and now they were short of packaging. He reached out with the cigarette and told Director Li to come on. Director Li listened as Yufeng said they came mainly because of the transportation costs. That was why they approached him first. Director Li nodded and said he understood. Yufeng then added that the most important thing was quality assurance, because their company was also a large enterprise. He spoke with confidence while standing in front of them. Director Li asked Yufeng if he worked in a state-owned company or a private company. But before Yufeng could say anything, he asked Director Li if they had some tea because he was a little thirsty. Director Li realized he forgot to pour tea for Yufeng as well. He went to get the tea and said it was just local tea, nothing fancy, and hoped Yufeng wouldn't mind. He walked back toward Yufeng with the tea can and a cup in his hands. Yufeng looked at Director Li and said their order was quite large. He asked if Director Li could make 1 ton of packaging bags within half a month. Director Li was shocked to hear such a big order, but he quickly calmed himself down and told Yufeng that if they worked overtime it should be possible. Yufeng smiled and told Director Li that they needed him to provide some samples for quality inspection. Director Li agreed and said he would do it. He then led Yufeng and the others into the warehouse. He pointed ahead and said that all the plastic bag stock was stored there, and they could take some for quality inspection. As they walked through the warehouse, Yufeng told Director Li that someone would call his factory tomorrow to inform him of the inspection results. Director Li nodded and said good, while shaking Yufeng's hand. He then asked Yufeng if he was in a hurry and invited him to the staff restaurant for dinner. Yufeng smiled politely and said they still had something to do, so maybe they could come another time. Director Li nodded. Yufeng told him that they would meet often in the future. Director Li replied that the coming days were long. The two sides waved to each other as Yufeng and Brother Chen walked away carrying the box. As they walked away, Brother Chen praised Yufeng excitedly. He said Yufeng was amazing and that they got the bags without spending any money. Yufeng smiled calmly and told Brother Chen to call Director Li the next morning. He instructed him to say that Director Li failed the quality inspection, so the business would not go through. Brother Chen nodded and said there was no problem. Brother Chen laughed and said the bag was so strong it could even carry a cow. Yufeng did not react much and told him to stop joking. Later they arrived at a house. Yu Feng walked toward Brother Chen, who was sorting oranges at a table. Yu Feng looked up and asked Brother Chen why he never invited him to a state-run restaurant like he once said. Brother Chen smiled, saying that Yu Feng remembered things so clearly, which was why he still hadn't eaten the rice cooked by his grandfather. After that, Yu Feng quietly thought to himself that every part of his plan was important and he needed Nick Liu for it. Then Yu Feng spoke and told Brother Chen that they should bring Nick Liu with them. Brother Chen complained right away. He said that the last time he played cards with Nick Liu, the man tried to cheat. Yu Feng didn't mind and said they should just call him. He explained that he lived in the same compound as Nick Liu, but they usually didn't run into each other. Later that night, they arrived at a state-run hotel, while Nick Liu was eating quickly and said the food was delicious because he had been hungry all day. Yu Feng and the others stayed quiet while watching him eat. When they finished, Brother Chen waved and said goodbye, telling the others to take care because he wouldn't walk them out that night. Outside under the moonlight, Nick Liu looked at Yu Feng and asked if Yu Feng and Chen Guoda were doing some kind of business together. Yu Feng answered calmly and said it was nothing like that. However, Nick Liu didn't believe him and told Yu Feng not to lie because he had heard everything during dinner. He begged Yu Feng to take him along. Yu Feng looked embarrassed and hesitated. Nick Liu reminded him that they had known each other much longer than Yu Feng had known Chen Guoda. Yu Feng finally gave in and said he would explain what actually happened. He then began telling Nick Liu the real situation. Yu Feng explained that if Nick Liu helped deliver fruit the day after tomorrow, he would earn 200 yuan. Nick Liu's eyes widened in shock. Nick Liu quickly tried to defend himself. He said he wasn't jealous and only wanted to remind Yu Feng that the last time they played cards, Chen Guoda forced him to cheat. He warned Yu Feng not to be fooled. Yu Feng looked at him quietly. Nick Liu became frustrated and asked if Yu Feng thought he was a fool. Yu Feng then thanked him for the reminder. He said he was poor and inexperienced, so he didn't think Chen Guoda could fool him. Yu Feng added that if Nick Liu agreed to come with him, he would give him 50 yuan. Nick Liu immediately agreed, repeating that he was in. Under the moonlight, Nick Liu invited Yu Feng to come inside his house and sit for a while. Yu Feng agreed. Inside the house, Yu Feng looked around and asked if Nick Liu had rented or bought the place. Nick Liu poured a drink and said he only rented it because he couldn't afford to buy a house. Yu Feng asked why, since he heard Nick Liu was the only locksmith in the village and should be earning good money. Nick Liu laughed awkwardly and told Yu Feng not to bring it up. He said he had quit being a locksmith a long time ago because he was once caught opening a neighbor's door out of ignorance. Yu Feng then became excited and asked him to show his skills. He wanted Nick Liu to teach him how to open a lock. Nick Liu agreed and said that they usually used a small tool for unlocking. He then showed Yu Feng the tool. Nick Liu held up the small unlocking tool and told Yu Feng to watch carefully. Yu Feng leaned in and focused on what he was doing. Nick Liu then pressed the tool into the old lock on the wooden door. With a quick twist, the lock opened easily. Yu Feng became excited when he saw it open and said it was amazing. He asked Nick Liu to teach him how to do it. Nick Liu, however, warned Yu Feng that the unlocking skill was basically teaching someone how to commit crimes, and learning it might lead him down the wrong path. Yu Feng raised a finger and told Nick Liu that he would give him 100 yuan right after the fruit delivery tomorrow. Nick Liu's eyes lit up with excitement. He happily reminded Yu Feng that he said it himself. The next day they arrived at the Lingshui steel factory. Yu Feng pointed ahead and said that this was the place. Chen rode up on his motorcycle and seeing Yu Feng looked surprised, wondering why Yu Feng brought Nick Liu with him. Yu Feng smiled and explained that he had come to help him. After coming inside the factory, Yu Feng quickly changed his clothes. Walking through the hallway, he thought to himself. He knew he couldn't act too early, because the relationship between Hu Han and Xu Changjiang was not simple. He stared ahead with a serious look and felt that something was definitely wrong. He believed there was something suspicious about the suppliers who were working with Xu Changjiang and Hu Han. As he was lost in his thoughts, suddenly Brother Chen looked at him in confusion and asked what was going on. Yu Feng stepped forward wearing a big straw hat and asked if he didn't look like a fruit farmer. Brother Chen gave him a thumbs up and said Yu Feng looked very professional. He told Yu Feng that all the packed fruits were already in the warehouse and the rest of the work was up to him. Sometime later, as the clock showed it was almost noon, in the cafeteria a few workers sat and ate their meals quietly. Nearby, Yu Feng and Nick Liu carried boxes. Yu Feng explained to Nick Liu that workers usually ate in the cafeteria at noon because it saved them time and effort. Nick Liu nodded and told him to just arrange everything. As they worked, Yu Feng suddenly grabbed his stomach and bent forward in pain. Nick Liu looked at him with concern and asked what happened. Yu Feng held his stomach and said it hurt, and he felt a little unwell. Yu Feng suddenly ran off holding his stomach. He said he couldn't hold it anymore and told Nick Liu to deliver the fruit first. He promised to come back as soon as he could. Nick Liu agreed and told him not to worry. Once Yu Feng was out of sight, he moved quickly. He said that since everyone was in the cafeteria now, he should finish the job fast. Yu Feng ran quickly through the hallway and stopped in front of Hu Han's office door. He tried turning the handle but the door was locked. He complained that the old man even locked the door while eating. Then he smirked and said he was prepared. He took out a small hook tool and began picking the lock. Yu Feng quietly pushed the door open and slipped inside the office. He walked straight to the bookshelf and began searching through the files. He pulled out a folder and opened it. When he saw the document, he said that he had finally found it. The paper was labeled Purchase and Sales Order, but then he frowned. He noticed there was no official seal. He wondered why the real purchase and sales contract wasn't there. Just then he looked at the bookshelf and noticed 4 big classical novels. He wondered why they were there. He thought that someone like Hu Han probably couldn't even read those books. He reached up to pull one of them out. Just as he touched the book, it suddenly slipped from the shelf. Yu Feng panicked and shouted in surprise as the large book titled Journey to the West fell toward the floor. Yu Feng stared at the fallen book and wondered what kind of book it was, because it made a very loud sound when it hit the ground. He looked nervous and confused. Then he noticed a hidden box that had fallen out from inside the book. He quickly decided to check it, hoping there might be something important inside. Papers were scattered all over the floor as he opened it. He picked up one of the papers and his eyes lit up. This was exactly what he was looking for. The purchase document for Sick Equipment Factory. Yu Feng looked confident and said to himself that Hu Han's time was finally up. After taking those documents, he came out from Hu Han's office and quietly went to work. However, when he came out, Nick Liu complained and asked if Yu Feng had fallen into the toilet because he took so long. He said he had almost finished the work before Yu Feng returned. Yu Feng walked over and handed him 100 yuan. Nick Liu's face lit up. He thanked Yu Feng and happily said that he would handle the rest of the job. After Nick Liu left, Yu Feng took out the document he had just gotten and found out that a small workshop director had forged the official company seal and taken more than 2.5 million yuan. He frowned and thought that doing something like this was basically asking for death. Meanwhile, at Ziyui's place, the group of people arrived at her house. One person greeted her and said she looked beautiful today. Ziyui turned her head when she heard them. Then she saw Yu Feng walking toward them and asked him what he was doing there. One of the men looked at Yu Feng and said with a mocking tone that it was surprising he still had time to wander around, laughing and mocking that divorced people always had plenty of free time. Then another woman in their group added that it must be hard for a divorced woman like Xiao Duo to get married again. Xiao Shan said that Xiao Duo should have left someone like Yu Feng a long time ago, calling him trash. However, Yu Feng didn't pay any attention to them. He walked towards Ziyui and ignored all of them. Upon seeing this, Hu Xiao became angry and wondered how he dared to ignore him. Then he walked up to Yu Feng and shouted at him. He grabbed Yu Feng's shoulder and told him to look at his own clothes, saying it was shameful to dress like that. Yu Feng's eyes turned sharp after hearing the insults. He stepped forward and shouted at Hu Xiao, telling him not to be mean. He grabbed the man by the collar and pushed him back. Hu Xiao stumbled and cried out in pain, begging Yu Feng to let him go. Yu Feng held him firmly with a calm, confident expression while Hu Xiao struggled in fear. The people nearby shouted for Yu Feng to stop. A woman called him crazy and told him to let Hu Xiao go. Yu Feng finally pushed Hu Xiao away lightly, telling him to go. Hu Xiao stumbled forward and crashed straight into the woman in the purple dress. Both of them fell to the ground, crying out in pain as they hit the floor. Yu Feng stood calmly and mocked Hu Xiao on the ground. He said that if Hu Xiao had no courage, he shouldn't make noise like an old hen. Hu Xiao struggled to get up. Furious, he shouted at Yu Feng and demanded to know who he was talking about. Yu Feng stood with his arms crossed and said calmly that his words were meant for whoever felt they applied to him. Hu Xiao got angry and shouted back, saying Yu Feng only had a little money because of his father. He demanded to know what Yu Feng was so proud of. Yu Feng looked relaxed as he said that Hu Xiao's father wouldn't last more than a few days. Hu Xiao became angry and tried to speak back, but Yu Feng stepped closer and stared at him. Yu Feng asked what he planned to do to him. Then he told him, Hu Xiaoshan, to think carefully. He asked if Hu Xiaoshan had noticed that since April his father hadn't changed at all. Hu Xiaoshan repeated Yu Feng's words in confusion. He asked himself what April had to do with any changes in his father. Then he suddenly remembered different moments. His father shouting at him, acting strangely, and even being seen entering a hotel with another woman. These memories flashed in his mind one after another. Hu Shaoshan's face turned pale. He shook his head and muttered that it wasn't true, trying to deny what he had just realized. Yufeng walked away and told Hu Shaoshan that he already knew the truth deep down. As Yufeng reached the gate, he looked toward Ziyue and asked if he could use her landline. He said he would pay for the phone bill. Ziyue looked surprised but agreed. Inside the house, Ziyue asked Yufeng where he wanted to call and what number she should dial. Yufeng paused for a moment, then told her to call the Xinnan equipment factory and ask for Ma Qinbao. He gave her the number. Ziyue dialed it and told him the call was connected. Yufeng picked up the phone. A voice from the other side asked who he was looking for. Yufeng said he wanted to speak to Ma Qinbao. The person on the line replied that they were Ma Qinbao and asked who he was. Yufeng spoke into the phone and said he was calling from Lingshui Steelworks. The man on the other end sounded confused. He said the number didn't look like a phone from Lingshui Steelworks. Yufeng quickly replied that it was a new phone and the situation was urgent. Hearing that, the man told him to continue. Yufeng then said loudly that the equipment accessories Hohan bought from their factory in April, May and June all had serious quality problems.